The sudden death of media mogul Robert Maxwell. Accident, suicide or murder? Robert Maxwell was a British media proprietor, a former Member of Parliament, MP, suspected spy, and fraudster. Originally from Czechoslovakia, Maxwell rose from poverty to building an extensive publishing empire. Maxwell had a flamboyant lifestyle, living in Headington Hill Hall in Oxford, from which he often flew in his helicopter, or his luxury yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. He was litigious and often embroiled in controversy. After his death, huge discrepancies in his company's finances were revealed, including his fraudulent misappropriation of the Mirror Group pension fund. Shock over his death turned to anger within weeks, when a £460 million hole was discovered in the pension funds of his companies. Maxwell had illegally raided the funds to prop up his empire, which was on the brink of collapse. Thousands of people lost their pension. Headlines such as "The Man Who Saved the Mirror" were swiftly replaced by "Maxwell, the Robber." On the 5th of November 1991, Maxwell was last in contact with the crew on his private yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, named after his favorite daughter, at 4:25 a.m. local time, but was found to be missing later in the morning. It has been speculated that Maxwell was urinating into the ocean, nude at the time, as he often did. He was presumed to have fallen overboard from the vessel, which was cruising off the Canary Islands, in the southwest of Spain. The official ruling at an inquest held in December 1991 was death by a heart attack combined with accidental drowning, though 3 pathologists had been unable to agree on the cause of his death at the inquest. The 3 pathologists examined the body and could not come up with a cause of death. No water was found in his lungs, which ruled out drowning. All 3 had different opinions about the cause of Maxwell's death. They finally put a heart attack on the death certificate. It is unclear whether the heart attack occurred in the water or caused him to fall overboard. Much speculation followed. Had Maxwell committed suicide, knowing that his world was about to crumble? Was it a tragic accident, or did someone murder him because he had become a threat or because he no longer was useful? So, what really happened? The British Foreign Office suspected that Maxwell was a secret agent of a foreign government, possibly a double agent or even a triple agent, and said he was a thoroughly bad character and almost certainly financed by Russia. He had known links to the British Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, to the Soviet KGB, and to the Israeli intelligence service Mossad. 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence services attended Maxwell's funeral in Israel. Yes, you heard me right, 6 former heads of Israeli intelligence services attended. While Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir praised him and stated, "He has done more for Israel than can today be told." Another hint of Maxwell's service to Israel was provided by John Loftus and Mark Ahrens, who described Maxwell's contacts with Czechoslovak communist leaders in 1948 as crucial to the Czechoslovak decision to arm Israel in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Czechoslovak military assistance was both unique and crucial for the fledgling state as it battled for its existence. According to Loftus and Ahrens, it was Maxwell's covert help in smuggling aircraft parts into Israel that led to the country having air superiority during their 1948 War of Independence. Shortly before Maxwell's death, a former employee of Israel's Military Intelligence Directorate, Ari Ben-Menashe, approached several news organizations in Britain and in the U.S. with the allegation that Maxwell and the Daily Mirror's foreign editor, Nicholas Davies, were both long-time agents for Mossad. Ben-Menashe also claimed that, in 1986, Maxwell informed the Israeli embassy in London that Mordecai Vanunu revealed information about Israel's nuclear capability to the Sunday Times, then to the Daily Mirror. Vanunu was subsequently kidnapped by Mossad and smuggled to Israel, convicted of treason and imprisoned for 18 years. Maxwell was seemingly a self-made man and rose from poverty to extreme riches. In 1981, he gained control of England's leading printing corporation, the British Printing Corporation, revived its sagging fortunes, and resold it to its managers in 1987. In 1984 he purchased the Mirror Group newspapers, publishers of 6 newspapers, including the sensationalist tabloid Daily Mirror, and in 1989 he tilted the balance of Maxwell Communications toward the United States, buying Berlitz International Language Instruction, Macmillan Book Publishers, and Official Airline Guides. He was several times on the list of England's 10 richest and most influential people. This man was a giant. But his financial empire had become shaky. Debts far exceeded the profits. He sold part of Pergamon and floated shares of the Mirror Group newspapers. He then secretly stole $1.2 billion from 2 of his flagship public companies and from employee pension funds in an effort to keep his empire from collapsing. And just after his death, many celebrities including the British Prime Minister John Major, went on television to state what an amazing man Maxwell had been. But they were about to regret their words when his empire imploded. Following Maxwell's death, the European ceased publication, and the Maxwell Communication Corporation filed for bankruptcy in the United States and petitioned for court protection in Britain. His 2 sons were charged with, among other things, allying themselves with their father in fraudulent financial dealings. But they were later acquitted when the court deemed that Robert Maxwell had done all of this by himself. In November 1991, Maxwell was aboard his yacht with a small staff. This in itself was unusual as the yacht usually had a large staff to look after the family. Maxwell received a call from his son to inform him he needed to return to the UK. A meeting with the Bank of England was scheduled. The meeting was to discuss the liquidation of his company. He had recently defaulted on a £50 million loan from Goldman Sachs. At 5 a.m. the following morning, Maxwell complained that the room was cold. Shortly after this, he walked to the stern of the boat. It was his custom to urinate over the side, but it is unclear whether this was why he went to the back of the boat or not. Then, by accident, by his own will, or forced by someone, he fell into the water, off the Canary Islands. When he failed to answer his phone at 11 a.m., the alarm was raised. Maxwell was found at 6 p.m. in the water. The only visible injury was a graze to his left shoulder, but the newspapers also reported that a tiny hole was found behind his ear. So, was it an accident, suicide, or murder? Maxwell was known to urinate from the boat and did so sometimes naked. A heart attack could have caused him to fall over the railing of the boat, and it is also possible that he slipped, fell into the sea, and then had a heart attack. But the 3 pathologists who examined the body could not come up with a cause of death. No water was found in his lungs, which ruled out drowning. They finally slapped a heart attack on the death certificate, even though they could not agree on the cause of death. But you could argue that accidents do happen, and it is the timing of his death that might make it look suspicious. It could, of course, just be an accident. With his empire about to crumble, and his whole life and legacy soon to be splintered into 1,000 pieces, it's not hard to imagine Maxwell committing suicide, instead of facing the shame and a life in relative poverty that soon would be upon him. He had built himself up from almost nothing, had close ties to the power elite in the Soviet Union, England and Israel, and with his media empire, few before him, has had more political power and influence on world politics than him. And maybe it really was the end of the line for Maxwell, that he knew there was no coming back from this and that was too much for him to bear. In his will, after his death, 8 of his 9 children were left with nothing. But his favorite daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, who he named his yacht after, was left with a fund that would give her $100,000 a year for the rest of her life. Telling something about Maxwell's personality and ruthlessness towards other people, even 8 of his own children. And to normal people, this would be a substantial sum to get every year. But for Ghislaine, this was like going on welfare money. She was brought up with friends not only to the British elite, but also had close ties to the British royal family. Becoming a personal friend of Prince Andrew, who she introduced to her close friend and one-time lover, Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein, the disgraced financier, would supposedly committed suicide in jail, rather than face the horrible charges against him that involved procuring underage girls, not only for himself, but also to some of the most powerful people in the world. Flying on his private plane, nicknamed the Lolita Express, was Bill and Hillary Clinton, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, actor Kevin Spacey, and many other famous and powerful people. Robert Maxwell was the man who opened the doors to the elite world for Jeffrey Epstein, helping him transforming from a high school teacher to becoming a very rich man. Maxwell also introduced Epstein to the Israeli intelligence service Mossad, where Epstein became an agent for the Israelis. Ghislaine Maxwell is, at the time of making this presentation, going to trial, accused of being the procurer of many of the young girls for Epstein. If convicted, she is facing life in prison. It is quite clear that Robert Maxwell worked for several intelligence agencies from different countries. The British Foreign Office was convinced that Maxwell worked for the Soviet Union. But Maxwell also gave the British valuable information about the Soviets, who he knew well, and he was regularly dining with the crème dele crème in Soviet politics. He had close contacts with not only the British royal family, but also British politicians, like Prime Minister John Major, who hailed Maxwell right after his death. Also, serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence services attended Maxwell's funeral in Israel, while Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir stated, "He has done more for Israel than can today be told." And this was what Maxwell excelled at, playing the field and getting him into favorable positions and making him able to be the spider in the web, pulling strings to his advantage. Something he managed to do for many years. In his book, The Assassination of Robert Maxwell, Israel's Super Spy, Martin Dillon claims that the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad assassinated Robert Maxwell. This is corroborated by former Mossad spy Viktor Ostrovsky, who claims in his book, by way of deception, that Maxwell was murdered because he was blackmailing Mossad, threatening to expose them and his role as an Israeli agent. According to Ostrovsky, Maxwell demanded several hundreds of millions of dollars from Mossad and Israel to not expose them, in order to save his crumbling empire. Spoiler alert. It's never a good idea to threaten an intelligence agency, no matter which country they come from.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
Yes, an American senator actually said this. According to former Mossad agent, Viktor Ostrovsky, who after breaking with Mossad, now living in Canada in exile, in his book, By Way of Deception, what he claims is his life insurance, because if they kill him, they will automatically verify the authenticity of his book. He claims that a special team of Mossad agents, knowing Maxwell's yacht was poorly staffed, came aboard Maxwell's yacht, in the middle of the night and assassinated him, with a syringe filled with poison that would mimic a heart attack, behind his ear, before they threw him overboard. And I remember this being reported in the newspapers. This was what got me interested in the Robert Maxwell case, the tiny mark behind this media mogul's ear, reported in one of the most mainstream papers in my country, VG. What seems to be an argument against suicide is that Robert Maxwell doesn't seem like the suicidal type. Going through his life, he had fought against things that would break many people. He had built himself up from nothing and become a very powerful figure, using all the tricks he had up his sleeve. And in my opinion, he seems like a man that would fight all the way to the end. What do you think? Was it an accident, a suicide, or was it something more sinister behind it? Please leave a comment below and let me know. And if you liked this presentation, please like, subscribe and share this video. And I hope to see you in the next one.